Hello and welcome to the FleeceFolk Diary. My name is Azra and you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as the Duchess of Sussex. This is part 2 of my Wicked Spin series. It is the second and final part, hopefully. In part 1 we spun Elphaba by Handmade by Catkin. Elphaba is on English Shetland. I am yet to spin Elphaba as of this point in time when I'm recording, because I thought I would just do a quick introduction to Glinda because of something I will do later on, which you would know if you'd already seen the Elphaba portion. These are 2 braids by Handmade by Catkin, the dyer at Handmade by Catkin is, I was going to say Belinda Ross. It is Caitlin Ross, dyeing in Canberra, Australia. And I hope you can hear me over the lawnmowers outside. But I was scrolling online and I saw a braid that I thought looked like Elphaba. I clicked on it and it was called Elphaba. And I then realized if Elphaba exists, Glinda has to exist too, and she does indeed. So here is Glinda. Glinda is also dyed on Faroe Island wool, 100% Faroe Island wool, which is a new wool to me, and we'll talk more about the wool in a second because it is something for me to research and for me to learn, so that will be interesting. And maybe we'll get into the character analysis a little bit later as well, but Glinda is sort of the counterpart or the antithesis to the character that is Elphaba. She is someone, in some interpretations, you could say, is misguided and believes that she is doing what she's doing for good, which is a song in Wicked the musical. So the way that I'm approaching this Wicked Spin series is that I'm going to break down the braids and spin inspired by the lyrics by the lyricist Stephen Schwartz. And the reason as to why I'm showing you this and recording this portion before I start my spin with Elphaba is because I think that Wicked is a story about friendship first and foremost. It's about love, it's about betrayal, it's about doing what's right, it's about good and bad, all the good things we love in a plot. But in Wicked Part 2, which is coming out soon actually, there's a song called For Good, and it's about how people come into our lives and how they change us and how we carry a part of them with us. And I thought, I was really inspired by that line, and I believe that both Glinda and Elphaba have a part of each other in them. So I'm going to take a strip or a chunk of Glinda and introduce that to my Elphaba braid spin, and take a chunk of Elphaba and introduce it to my Glinda spin, so that even the 2 skeins will forever have a part of each other within them. I believe the lyric is because I knew you, I have been changed for good. So let's open up Glinda and see how she looks. I mentioned in my Elphaba part how I love the way Caitlin packages up her skeins. It's so compact, and you can always fluff up the fibre before you spin it, but she sort of slips the ends into the cuff. Wow, look at these colors. Ooh, yummy. That's gorgeous. Alright, let's not get distracted. I think what I'm going to do is, for context, I'm spinning Elphaba inspired by the song Defying Gravity, and the line that I got inspired by the most is her saying, or her singing, to those who ground me, take a message back from me, it's time to start defying gravity. And she is sort of, that's the turning point for her character, where she decides that she's not going to let anyone hold her back, basically. So she's going to be spun really randomly on I actually don't know what I've done yet because I haven't spun it yet, but you'd know at this point before me. But Glinda is kind of a stickler for the rules, and she is basically a propaganda machine on wheels, isn't she? On legs. Oh, look at these colors. Yum. I don't know how I'm gonna take a strip of her. I think I'm going to just take, because I don't want Glinda to influence Alphabet too much. Oh. I'm going to take, oh, this is probably hurting so many of you at home to watch. I want to capture all the colors, so maybe that much. Yeah, let's say this much of Glinda will be introduced to Alphaba. All right, it's a new day and I think I'm ready to spin Glinda. Let's get started. So here's Glinda. As discussed yesterday, she is on a 100% Faroe Island wool, and that is a new to me wool. Just look at these colors. I unfurled most of her yesterday when I spun Alphaba, and I haven't really paid that much attention to Glinda, and I was a little worried about where I was going to draw inspiration for Glinda. And one of her first signature songs is Popular, and she's really sort of like preppy in it. I pulled this skirt out to wear for the Glinda portion of this video, and my partner said, "Oh, that's great, that's what she wears at Shiz University." So I've gotten, you know, as sort of flouncy and flowery as I can manage to get. Let's not talk about my hair, it's where I store all my secrets. But yeah, with her I really wasn't sure, and then I thought of the song Popular, and one of the ways in which I find hand-dyed fiber braids split most often, most popularly, is in a fractal fashion, to create something that in the skein will be a fractal. So the colors will be repeating in sort of a measured, controlled manner, which is in such stark contrast to how I spun Alphaba, which was to strip it every which way. I've split the braids in half. I've split it lengthways, widthways, little bits here and there. So it'll be really interesting to see how they, I guess at this point you would already know how that turned out. So I'm going to, because I've done Alphaba in a 2-ply, I'm going to also do Glinda as a 2-ply fractal. So the first thing I will need to do, which I do not enjoy doing, is I'm going to just, because when it's pin drafted and then combined together, there's usually a split in the fiber, I think. I'm not sure how this was done, but I'm just going to flatten the entire braid to start with. And I thought while I do this, it would be a good time to talk about Faroe Island wool. This is a new to me wool, but I believe it is also a rare wool. The Faroe Islands are way up north compared to me down here in Australia in the Southern Hemisphere, and I believe they do fall under the Nordic category, although I will confess that I often get confused about the Nordic versus Scandi split. I thought I did have seen in the past a video about the Faroe Islands, and I've searched it up again recently, and I'll link it down below. And that and the other accompanying video that I'll link below have formed a lot of what I know about Faroese wool. The Faroe Islands look absolutely majestic. It's just gorgeous, and from what I've heard and from what I've read, sheep outnumber people. I believe there's like something like 70,000 odd sheep to about 50,000 of the local population. And I believe wool was a main source of income for the islands not too long ago, actually. So there is a strong knitting and wool culture in the Faroe Island and through the Faroese traditions from what I've learned. If on the rare chance that you are Faroese or you have knowledge of Faroese people and culture and wool, please educate us below. Tell us what you know, and let's just share the knowledge. From what I've seen of the Faroese sheep, they look very similar to me. They look a bit Shetland-like, and I'm aware that Shetland isn't that far from the Nordic and Scandinavian regions, so in that way I think it's also poetic that Caitlin dyed these on the Faroe wool base and the Shetland wool base, where they're from sort of a similar region but have completely different characteristics. I'll give you a close-up of the Faroe Island wool, and it is very rustic. It is almost hair-like. When I spun this yesterday with the spongy, drafty Shetland, it is very hair-like. In the braid, there were bits of hair kind of sticking out. Let's see if I can show you. If this would only focus. But it is very hairy. And the sheep look really proud. They have this sort of like very long pelts in their fleece. And they reminded me a lot of the Icelandic sort of staple or wool. I've never worked with Icelandic wool before. That's not something you find in Australia, but I have watched a lot of content and consumed a lot of information about them. Okay, wish me luck. I'm going to split this in half. Like the Icelandic, all that to say that they have a really sort of woolly, warm, fluffy inner coat and a hair-like, more sort of weather-resistant outer coat. And one of the people in the videos that I watched, I believe she's a knitwear designer who lives in Tórshavn, which I think is the capital of the Faroe Islands. She said that in reality, that means you can get 3 kinds of yarn out of the fleece. A really woolly yarn, a really hairy, sort of longer stapled yarn. But she said most often you'll find it mixed in yarn that you find. I have a scale just on the ground here. I'm going to see how evenly I split this. I was listening to last night one of the first songs, if not the first song in the second act of the musical, and that is, it is the chorus and sort of like the cast singing and Glinda, and it is a song called Thank Goodness. And we were analyzing, my partner and I, Glinda's character, and I said, oh, I'm so biased towards Elphaba, but you know, and I think Elphaba's relatable, but everyone's the hero of their own story. What do you think about Glinda? And he said, well, you said it. Everyone thinks they are the hero of their own story. And Glinda believes that too. But it's in the song, Thank Goodness, that you start to see a little sprinkle of her actualizing and realizing that what she thinks she's done, you know, for the greater good, may not so much be the case. And she kind of starts to repress that because she's gone too far. She's gone too far to backpedal now. So if these two aren't even, let's say it's representative of her finding out that it's not so perfect after all. I told you, I can take a metaphor so far. Okay, let's see. First half. Oh boy. 34 grams. Second half. 58. Ooh, that is not good. Let's take a bit more. The way that I will do the 2-ply fractal is I will keep one of the halves, I'll spin it top to bottom. Are you 20 grams, sir? Nope, you're 6 grams. And the other I will just strip into bits, although I do want it to be a little bit more perfect. Maybe I will split it into 3. Or maybe I will jumble it. yeah, it'll still in the final product come out fractal. Hopefully. Okay, I will spin top to bottom. Can I get any more stray pieces? That just doesn't. It won't be perfect. I'll have some left over anyway. And of course I have the tuft of Elphaba in all her colors to also introduce to my Glinda spin. So I will split this in half and introduce it to each end randomly to symbolize their interwoven story. So that was a little bit about Glinda's character analysis and Faroe Island wool, kind of in the same mishmash fruit salad, but that's just how it goes. We exist on tangents here. Let's get spinning. All right, I'm getting started with Glinda. Look at these hairs. I don't know if you can see. Oh, I definitely cannot. But there's, it's just so hairy. I'll give you a little close up later. And I can see that those are the longer hairs of the Faroese. This drafts really beautifully too. There we go. Yeah, it is a very hairy, I don't know a better way to describe it. I think it will not do that well with very high twist because it might feel a bit ropey. But yeah, see, I don't think I can do short forward, or that I will bother. I will do sort of my standard supported, I call this bastardized long draw all the time because it is kind of, that is what it is. I could really do long draw, but I'm not feeling super adventurous. The thing with 2-ply is that it's going to, not that I'm looking for something perfect, but the law of averages is not really in my favor. It's not going to be as averaged out and smooth and even as a 3-ply. So I'm sure you can see kind of faintly in the bobbin some of that color coming through. I'll give you a different angle in a second. I'm just getting acquainted. I picked a bobbin that isn't super empty, but maybe I will regret it. These are the newer Ashford bobbins compared to ones that come with like your second hand. I don't know when they switched, but they do house a bit more than the older traditional ones. Not that much more though. I've noticed it during Tour de Fleece for sure. So that's good, I guess, because I was plying bobbins from older and newer models, and I would just run out of the older bobbins way faster. Okay, hopefully Glinda goes pretty quick because look at that. Just the colors are beautiful. One thing about Glinda when I saw this is that I didn't feel like it was as powdery and as sort of blossomy as I see her dressed in the musical. But something that happened with Elphaba is that the color really mellowed out. So I'm hoping all these tones will just be gorgeously mixed in. I hope it comes out of Fractal. I'm really not sure. But I'm happy to take the gamble. Okay, this just spins itself. I mean, I could have a cuppa, have lunch, file my taxes, do so much with my free hand. Yeah, okay. Let's spin long draw then. have to say that I really think, given the strength of this fiber and like its tensile strength and its sort of all these hairs, I think it would be wonderful to weave with. The Faroese do knit sweaters with this and have done for centuries, but I think if you add a bit of extra twist especially, this would be fabulous as a warp of a weave. Turns out I'm still not done yapping. Another thing that I'm noticing when I'm spinning Faroe Island is a Faroese wool is that it does tend to spin thick and it takes up the twist really fast, and I can completely see why yarns like the Lopi yarns, so like the Lopi family of yarns, the Lopi that are spun just as singles exist, because it has just so much strength and integrity just as a single ply. It's not a fragile kind of yarn, especially because I can tell in this braid that inner coat and top coat are both blended, and I can see sort of little black or colored hairs amidst the lighter fiber that's been dyed over. So if you are spinning, or if you're on the lookout for a breed of wool that you'd like to spin as singles, I think the Icelandic type breeds are amazing. If you can get your hands on Faroese wool, in Australia, the only place I know I can get it has been through Caitlin at Handmade by Catkin in the most recent drop. I recommend it. It's I don't think it's for everyone, but it's worth the experience, you know? Just wanted to show the current bobbin. There's definitely some thick and thin because I am not doing short forward. There is more room for that. As you can see, Elphaba has been introduced, and as with Glinda on Elphaba's bobbin, the difference in the walls is just sort of, you know, chalk and cheese. I thought this was funny because it looks a bit like there's a bit of blue missing. My cloth over there looks a bit blue. It looks a bit like the Scooby-Doo cast. You know, you've got Shaggy, Velma, and Daphne here with the pink. I feel like I've been flashing you heaps this episode. I'm very sorry. I have finished with my first bobbin, which I will show you at the end when I'm finished with this bobbin as well. This is the pile of fluff for the second bobbin, and I'm going to, just for my own sanity and to have a very easy, cruisy, continuous spin, create little nestlets from the little strips that I will have created. It really is so different to Shetland. I think in this one I will introduce the Shetland in 2 spots. Just for fun, just as a curveball. If I know that I'm gonna get through this spin really fast. Sorry, you're really on the side. But if I were not to do that, especially if I was, you know, combining 2 braids or knew I wouldn't have time, I would do this anyway, create nestlets and then store it in like a Ziploc or something like that, because I'm not a monogamous project person. I have multiple projects going at any given time, and one thing that I will forget from project to project are things like color management and all that good stuff. So just to sort of not forget what I intended to do, I set myself up sort of reminders of what I intended with how I prep and store the projects. An example of that is like sometimes I will get a 100-gram braid and I'll split it down the middle and think that I will spin top to bottom on one bobbin, bottom to top on one bobbin, and then ply them together. And that gives a nice sort of fractal effect as well. But I will often forget which end the top end was. So I will either tie a little knot on the end that I want to start from, or tie a ribbon to it, you know, do what you have to do. You can also use Ravelry. If you keep a project page, to be very honest with you, I cannot be bothered. So the second half of the braid I'm just splitting into mostly lengthways, tiny bits, but the way I hacked into this braid, it hasn't quite worked out, but because I did manage to get a good top to bottom spin of the first half, the effect should still be there. Should. Okay, a bit more of this. My little nests. You see? Oop. Yeah. And I'll just pick and spin, pick and spin. For the plying station, I realized I didn't show you Glinda. These are the finished bobbins for Glinda. You can see just how hairy the Faroe Island wool is. And you can see Glinda come through on that. This is my Fractal bobbin, and that's my top to bottom bobbin. Here we go. I think they say no rest for the wicked. I can't wait. I'm gonna apply these right now on the red bobbin. Just counted and measured the meterage of Glinda as well. By the way, I keep saying Glinda, but halfway through part 1 she does change it to Glinda, which is again another little quirk of hers. But yep, she's bloomed just a little bit, but I'll just show you. Here is Glinda in all her glory. There's some thick and some thin. Elphaba married with her beautifully in these parts. That was not planned. One thing I'm unsure about is whether the fractal effect has come through in the final yarn. I can't really say, but I love it regardless. You can really see the little hairs. If I get out of the way. It's really quite fascinating. Some of those hairs might be mine. No, I just saw black hair. Thought it was mine. This has been a lovely, lovely study also of Faroe Island wool. I am also quite amused. Let me put her next to Elphaba. Oh, isn't that lovely? That really works. But these were both niddy-noddied on the same PVC pipe niddy-noddy that I use. I think I show it in one of the clips as well. But they, even wet, they hung quite differently. Look at how much longer Glinda is compared to Elphaba. And that alone should show you the different characteristics of the wool. The Shetland really has, I believe their locks have more of a crimp, and therefore they have sort of more memory and they spring back, and the skein itself is really springy and quite plush and cushy. I've started doing a very cool girl thing, and using the cuffs that come around the fiber braid as a label for the skeins as well, which is a lovely way to preserve it. I have started collecting these labels just for my sort of scrapbooking purposes. Sorry, let's look at Elphaba one more time. And with Elphaba, the final skein is coming in around 94 grams, and I have a meterage of 303 meters in those 94 grams. The yarn has come out a sort of fingering to a light sport weight, and I think that is reflected in the yardage or the meterage, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just try to skein. It's hard to contain her, which I guess is the point. There we have it. That's about as big as my face. Elfie, on the other hand, if you remember, Glinda, on the other hand, my goodness. Glinda, I spun sort of a long draw / backward draw, and that sort of gave her a bit more plumpness. Also, it's a whole different breed, isn't it? But she has come in at 195 meters for about 91 grams of yarn, of weight. So that's really interesting, and I think, I don't know if you can tell, but I would say this came, I used my little yarn gauge from 1121 Windmills, and this has come in at maybe like a heavy sport to a light DK. I think comfortably sport, although the weight doesn't really make sense. But that's another interesting point as well. Sometimes when I think about 100 grams of alpaca that is spun at a DK versus 100 grams of sheep wool spun at a DK, the weightage does change, but I also think it changes based on breed. Am I wrong? I don't know. Would love your thoughts on that. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me and entertaining these ideas on my channel. I've really had a ball spinning up these two. Look at even the plumpness, you know, this is nice and plush, and that's sort of a little runner bean. But it's been a joy to spin these up. It's been lovely to carry that metaphor throughout the spin. I don't know what projects I would use these on. If you have any ideas, do let me know. I have a 303 meters of that and 195 meters of that. I think, as I spoke about in the video, given the strength of this yarn and kind of drape, I would love to use this as a warp in a weave. I think it would really hold up a lovely fabric, a nice sturdy fabric. This would make a lovely bag even. And the Shetland 303 meters is quite significant. That could become sort of a cowl on its own, or a little shawlette. But if you do end up spinning or making anything as part of this Wicked season, you can use the hashtag FleeceFolkWickedSpins, and please do tag me on Instagram. I'm the Duchess of Sussex, and I will add you to my profile highlights. And you can interpret the word Wicked Spins as sort of a spin on a theme. So it doesn't have to be spinning or spindling or on the wheel or whatever. It can be a knit, it can be a crochet project, it can be a null binding project, whatever you do, I would love to see. Let me know what you think. I'm curious to see how Glinda develops in the second half, or Wicked Part 2. I've had such a grand time having a chat with all of you in the comments of my Elphaba video on your interpretations and your memories with watching Wicked on Broadway and otherwise, or some of you watching for the first time or discovering a new likeness for the singers as you discover them. I want to convey to any dyers watching of both yarn, of fabric, of fiber, that when you dye something and when you call it something, the story doesn't end there. that it's inspiration that you are paying forward. You know, this, Caitlin could have called this, literally could have called it forest floor or grass on tar, I don't know. But just seeing that inspired me so far, and I've had, you know, 2 weeks of just such fun that I was able to turn this to more than just a spin. So as with nail polish, even with fiber and with yarn, as a dyer, when you name something, there is significance there, and I hope you can take inspiration from this video and with others that have done similar things to get creative with what you do with colorways. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I will see you next week. My advents have arrived, so advent season is slowly creeping in. December might look a little different in terms of the upload schedule here on YouTube, but I'll let all that come organically. Thank you for joining me. I hope you also have fun. If there are other dyers, even internationally, that have dyed to a theme that you're really loving, I would love to see. I think it might have been Explorer Knits that did a Wicked collection as well. So if you have any of that, I'd love to see what you have, whether in stash or in projects. I think I've said goodbye about 3 times. I'm actually gonna go now. Thank you so much for watching. Because I know you, I have been changed for good. Yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye.